Well, good evening, everybody, and many thanks for joining us here at the School of Public Policy at the Central European University. We have a very full programme, so I will keep my remarks brief. I'm delighted to welcome all of you to today's event that the School of Public Policy is co-hosting with our colleagues from the Department of History and Professor Matthias Riedel, and also the Embassy of India in Budapest. The occasion is the launch of the Hungarian edition of Gandhi's Outstanding Leadership, which has been translated into 11 Indian and now 14 foreign languages. Its author, Pascal Nazareth, had a long and distinguished career as a diplomat, serving in more than a dozen countries before retiring in 1994. He is currently managing trustee of Salvador International Trust, an organisation that he co-founded in 1995 and which is dedicated to promoting the Gandhian principles of truth, non-violence, communal harmony, humanitarian service and of peace. We are especially honoured to have Mr. Nazareth with us this evening and are looking forward to his remarks about his book. I would also like to thank Mr. Gaun Shankar Gupta, the former ambassador of India to Hungary, for attending tonight. And before I hand over to His Excellency, the current ambassador to India, Mr. Rahul Chabra, would like to launch the book. Thank you. Do you want me to stop the book?
Good evening, welcome everybody. My name is Livia Stelpan and I'm the translator of Mr. Nazareth's Hungarian edition. It was an honor for me to translate this book, and I'm also an alumna of this university, and we are most grateful that we can be here and the Hungarian edition can be launched here. And I would like to officially ask Julia Baxton, the Dean of the School of Public Policy, and His Excellency, Mr. Ambassador Rahul Chabra, to officially release the Hungarian edition. Please come here.
Since there is no ribbon, it has been tied in a shawl, and you will have to do just. You're not very good at the use of the dagger, I noticed.
No, I shouldn't be. I'm a diplomat, sir.
So thank you very much for Julia Baxton and also His Excellency Rahul Chabra for officially releasing the book. And now I would like to ask, it's an honor to ask Mr. Nazareth just to welcome him and ask him to give his speech on his book. Thank you.
Your Excellency, Ambassador Rahul Chabra, very many thanks, not only for being here, but you have supported this particular project from the very beginning with my very first email to you almost 2 months ago. I'm greatly honored that you are here. I request you to share some of your thoughts on this occasion with us today, which is a very proud moment for me.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, my deepest apologies for being so late. I'm not normally late, but I don't know. We'll just cut the excuses because I think it's not even worth making an excuse. So my apologies. Sorry. While I was planning for this evening's event, I was just wondering what and how to sort of put this in context of such a privileged occasion to be here for this release of this book. So I thought I'll just run you through 3 or 4 of personal instances that have happened to me over the course of my life as a diplomat in the context of Gandhiji. I thought that would make it more relevant to you, because the rest of it is there in the book, and maybe Mr. Nazareth will also be speaking about the other issues. So I'll just sort of tell you what happened to me. Starting with Senegal, this was the city of Dakar. I was posted there as a young diplomat. I'm talking of the early 90s, and Nelson Mandela was visiting Dakar. And there was no ambassador, so I was asked to sort of represent India. And there were over 75 other ambassadors there, and there was this young myself walking in. And we all shook hands with the Nelson Mandela. And at the end of which, everyone wanted now to sort of, those were the days there was no selfie or any such thing. So, wanted a photograph, wanted to chat with Nelson Mandela and stuff like that. And he turns around and says quite audibly and loudly, it was a room like this, I remember still, and he says, I want to meet the man from the land of Gandhi. Where is that young diplomat? Please call him out. So that was my first sort of global impact of what we were talking about, Gandhiji's influence, which I was talking to Ambassador Nazareth early in the morning, and he was saying how people don't really realize what sort of impact it makes. So, I mean, of course, Nelson Mandela, we all know, was a big follower of Gandhiji, but then it made me so proud to be there, having 15 minutes with Nelson Mandela while everybody else was waiting, and I was just a second secretary. I was nowhere in that pecking order, so to speak. So that was the first incident that I thought I'll just mention to you. The second one happened, these are just random incidents. I mean, we were planning a visit of the Indian president to South Africa, President Kalam, probably one of our best presidents that we have had. And this was, we were being shown the station where Gandhiji was offloaded, Pietermaritzburg. So we were there, and of course, it's no longer a station. There's no train that runs on that line anymore for many years now, many decades maybe. So I said, look, it will be a pretty nice sort of visual treat and an experience to have the Indian president sort of offloaded at this Pietermaritzburg station. So they said, no, there's no line, no train, nothing has run on this track for so many years now. And I said, maybe it's a few decades. I said, look, we have to do that. And since then, I'm happy to say that they did it once, and now it's become sort of a ritual. I think anytime an Indian VIP goes to South Africa, sort of, he's taken on this train to Pietermaritzburg and sort of ceremoniously offloaded the train from there. But the South African authorities were extremely cooperative in sort of opening up that whole line and running that train station. Then I went on to the United States. I was dealing with the India-US nuclear deal, talking to a lot of congressmen and senators on the Hill and the Senate there. And lo and behold, among many congressmen and senators, there was Senator Harry Reid, the House Democratic leader, and then Senator Obama, whom we met. And all of them had Gandhiji's bust or Gandhiji's photograph on their table. And very proudly so, of course. They would always refer to, their links to how they thought about Gandhiji, how they read Gandhiji's works, and the influence that Gandhiji had on their lives. So I think this sort of, again, sort of corroborates what I had the discussion earlier this morning with Ambassador Nazareth on Gandhiji's influence, though it may not be, people may not really realize it, but it is there in so many multiple ways across the world. And I'll sort of end by telling you a really personal anecdote, because in the bureaucracy, diplomacy, many of us get cynical at many moments. Maybe you get cynical even otherwise in other fields of life, but I know in my field. And then I sort of tell my kids and all that, nothing's ever going to change, and it's the same, it just goes on. And when he says, what's up? So at this, my young son, who's never really lived in India, he's lived abroad with me all over the world, in Africa and US and all that, turns around and says, Dad, if that's what Gandhiji thought, we wouldn't be independent today, would we? So, I mean, I think that says it all, that be the change that you wish the world to be in. And so that sort of jolts me out of my cynicism. Every time I feel that, I think of what he told me, and then, it sort of brings me back. And then, of course, you've all heard what Einstein had said, that, in generations to come, we'll really wonder whether a man like this in flesh and blood ever walked this earth. So I think on that note, I will just like to congratulate Ambassador Nazareth for this wonderful initiative, Livia Selpal for having translated it, the Central European University for organizing this evening event. Congratulations to all of you for having put together this wonderful book. I hope all of you get to read it. Unfortunately, I can't read Hungarian, but I will be looking at the English version of the book. So on that note, congratulations to everyone, and have a great evening. Thank you so much, sir.
Ambassador Rahul Chabra, Ambassador Gauri Shankar Gupta, Dean Julia Bassett, and dear friends. Well, first of all, I would like to pay my tribute to the brave Hungarian, many of them, I believe, students, who rose 60 years ago today. It was the first uprising for freedom in this part of the world. It didn't succeed. It was followed later by the uprising in Czechoslovakia. But at the third attempt under Lech Walesa, it worked. But all those who sacrificed their lives in this have made a great contribution to the transformation that came about in Europe, where communist dictatorships collapsed almost like a house of cards, within a 3 or 4 year period. But it all begins really, I believe, right here. And today I heard from our ambassador an amazing story that one of these young students had been in touch with our then chargé d'affaires in the Embassy of India. And he was given a pet name called the Painter. Later on, when this collapsed, he was arrested along with all the others. All the others, I think, were sentenced to death. But thanks to the embassy here and through working through our embassy in Moscow, they managed to save his life. And later he became president of this country. Yeah, amazing story, yeah. So my tribute to all of them. Now, I must tell you maybe why I got into this effort of researching and writing about Gandhi in my old age. I retired at the age of 58. Now, when I traveled through the world, I discovered through the countries I went, particularly after I became ambassador, the great reverence with which Gandhi was held at the highest level: president, prime minister, foreign minister, university president. And they were very deeply impressed with Gandhi. Not only that, there were universities giving courses on Gandhi, Gandhi's political strategy, non-violent resistance, etc., etc. When I came back to India, I found that even those Gandhians who spent all their lives, writing, researching on Gandhi, doing every single thing that he did, including the spinning, etc., knew absolutely nothing about Gandhi's impact on the world. I said, maybe this is one little contribution that I could make, since I have traveled all over, and I know myself what effect this man has had. So I decided to write this book. It was meant mainly for my own countrymen, to tell them Gandhi's impact on the world. I believe this is the main reason why this has been such a success all over, that it has come out already. This is the 25th language edition of the book. Really amazes me, and of course pleases me greatly. But I think a lot of people know a lot about Gandhi, but I'd like to highlight a few things about him to bring out the the greatness and the amazing thing about the man. When he was young, he was very, very timid. He has written in his biography, he was afraid of the darkness, he was afraid of ghosts, he was afraid of spiders and things like that. Later on, he becomes the most fearless man in the world. In fact, his motto becomes, "He who fears, fails." What a transformation. And what brings about this transformation? This, in a way, is what got me interested in the man. He gets thrown out of a train, South Africa. Man, he's just 24 years old and completely an Englishman at that, so, dressed in a three-piece suit, quoting the Bible and English literature, etc. Now, when he gets thrown out of the train, something happens to him. And it's very important to know why this happened. And I believe this is where the spiritual inputs into Gandhi become very important. And not many people are aware of this. Now, Gandhi was not very religious in his youth. The first time he has heard about the Bhagavad Gita is when he has gone to London and some people ask him about it. He is ashamed that he has not even read it. It is there that he gets introduced to the Bhagavad Gita. Thereafter, as he says, it becomes his encyclopedia of daily reference. This becomes his guiding star. What is the message of the Bhagavad Gita? That when you are faced with evil and injustice, you have no option. Your duty is to stand up and to confront it. You may succeed, you may not succeed. That is often of no concern to you. You have to do your duty. And you have to do your duty to confront injustice, even if you find that the injustice that you see is located in your own family or your own brother. This is what is happening in this place. Arjuna is saying that, sorry, I can't fight because I'll be killing my own relation. Arjuna says, no, that's of no concern to you. Your duty is to fight this. Now, the amazing thing is, at the age of 24, here is this man. He has been thrown out of a train. He is not worried about his rights. We are all worried all the time about our rights. The man is talking about his duty. What an amazing thing. But the Bhagavad Gita is not the only spiritual input. There are others. There are very important Christian input. What is the Christian input? What is the message of Christ? Love one another as I have loved you. You have to resist evil, but you have to resist it with love. And self-suffering. It is through the crucifixion that redemption will come. So self-suffering is a very important component in the whole Gandhian strategy that he called satyagraha, but I think is much better described as soul force. He has also used the word soul force, and Martin Luther King has used the word soul force. It is to make use of the strength of your soul and to use it in order to resist oppression. And he has a simple argument. For Gandhi, truth was God. It seems confusing. We are all very familiar with God is love, God is justice, God is this and God is that. But to say that truth is God is to sort of turn it on its head. I could understand it in my youth, but now it's become clear. What is truth? Truth is what is. Now, the only reality which always is, which always has been is the Creator. So to that extent, it is very correct to say that truth is God. Now, Gandhi's argument is, if you stand up for the truth, if you put yourself on the side of truth, you cannot lose. Because by definition, God cannot lose. Of course, you might not live to see the success of your mission, but that's not important. The important thing is that your mission must succeed. So therefore, always stand up for the truth and put God on your side. And it worked. Now, using this, just two words, truth and non-violence, he created this thing, satyagraha. Now, truth and non-violence were in the Indian tradition for hundreds, at least 3,000 years. But no one had ever put them together. That is Gandhi's great theoretical contribution. He has put the two together and made it like two sides of the same coin. Now, a lot of people think that Gandhi was a pacifist. A lot of statues and him show him in a very meditative pose. Gandhi actually was a militant. he was a warrior. But his whole technique was to confront with the truth. You know, satyagraha literally means to cling firmly to the truth. I believe it really is to confront with the truth. He therefore provoked a certain confrontation. The whole aim was to force your oppressor onto the negotiating table and to make a mutually acceptable agreement. That was the whole thing. He says the non-violent revolution is not a program for seizure of power. It is an effort to bring about a transformation of relationship. You have to make, the word enemy is not in the Gandhian vocabulary, is to make your opponent your friend. Martin Luther King has said that about 100 years earlier, when he said the best way to get rid of your enemy is to make him your friend. That is the technique. And this is really what Gandhi achieved. It was a bitter struggle against the British, but the British left as friends. In fact, the British historian Arnold Toynbee says, Gandhi was as much a friend of England as he was of the Indians, because he made it possible for us to leave India without rancor and without the bitterness, and without loss of face. So that is the whole technique. And if you just imagine, I've written a sequel to this book which is coming out in January next year. It is titled Gandhi, Soul Force Warrior, who revolutionized revolution and spiritualized it. Revolutionized revolution is not my description. Johan Hjaltung, the great Swedish peace professor, is the one who has described it thus. Now, Gandhi's achievements, if you think about it, are truly revolutionary. And he has done all this at the same time when the most dreadful things are happening in Europe. No part of the world has massacred each other like Europe has. And just what happened, for instance, in the last century is dreadful. The figure is really amazing. Between 90 and 95 million people have been killed in 100 years, on an average of 100 million a year. And we call this, an average of 1 million a year. And we call this civilization. Now, at this time, Gandhi has come out with this new technique of soul force and brought down the greatest empire the world has ever seen. It was the pride boast of the British that the sun never sets on the British Empire. In one sense, it seemed a very foolish boast because the sun has set on every empire. But in one way, it was very accurate, because every hour of the day, the British Empire extended all the way from Fiji in the east to Vancouver in the west. So every hour of the day, the sun was overhead on a British flag. So when it set somewhere, it was rising somewhere else. So it was quite accurate. Now he has brought down this empire and all other empires between 47 and 1960. Much of the white man's burden was removed from their shoulders. Because once a people realizes that an unarmed people, when they unite, are not afraid to die, there's nothing that can stop them. It's the most amazing thing that you could imagine. But just see what happened in India. A country where there were 560 rajas, maharajas, the most feudal country you could imagine, the princes and the paupers, almost overnight goes to become a democracy based on universal adult franchise. Whether you are a prince, whether you are a pauper, whether you are an untouchable, a very unfortunate description, we no longer use that word, what we now call a Dalit, get an equal right to rule. Women were very oppressed in India. Within 30 years, India gets a woman prime minister. Within 50 years, gets a Dalit president. Shortly thereafter, we got a Dalit woman chief minister in India's largest state, the California of India. All this without chopping anyone's head off. Now think of how much of blood was spilled, how much that guillotine had to work in France before you got rid of feudalism. What happened in Russia? What happened in China? It's absolutely amazing the sort of things that Gandhi has brought about, which entitles him to what he has been described, that he revolutionized revolution. He has brought about radical change without bloodshed. The other amazing thing I would like to point out is that to get rid of 3 detestable dictators in the last war, in Hitler, Mussolini, and Togo, more than 50 million people have been killed. 50 million. Now, as a result of non-violent revolutions, there has been the most major transformation of global political geography that there has ever been. Dictatorships brought down all over Eastern Europe, in the Philippines, in South Africa, in the United States, all over. People have died. They have died here in Hungary. But you add them all up, it doesn't even add up to 50,000. And you therefore decide which is a better form of struggle. Now, the last point I'd like to make is not so well known, that Gandhi made another very major contribution, in that he rooted his entire strategy in spirituality. When you root it in truth, you are in fact rooting it in spirituality. Gandhi had said, my religion is something that transcends Hinduism. It's far above Hinduism. It is something that unites one intimately to the truth, and in which the soul is restless until it finds itself. So by doing so, he has raised religion to the level of spirituality. One of the great tragedies of the world is that there's too much of religion, sadly, of the worst type you could imagine, as we all see the violence that is being created in the name of religion. He has raised it to the level of spirituality. And this is what the world needs most of all. And I believe, though it doesn't seem likely at the moment, that in fact the world is on this path. I see so many of them here, already transformed people. The world, I believe, is on this path. And one of the people who has made the great contribution besides Sri Chinmoy, whom many people in this room know and revere so well, is the Dalai Lama. I know him personally. In fact, he has written the foreword to my next book. And I have told him, you know, the invasion of Tibet by the Chinese is a great tragedy for China. But there is an important silver lining. If it was not for the Chinese, you people were not really worried about the world. You were very happy in that Shangri-La of yours, and you were quite happy to, ignore. Now you have been forced upon the world, and for the first time in more than 1,000 years, the world is listening, hearing again the message of the Buddha. He and his followers have set up 1,800 what they call Dharma centers in the world. And people are coming to meditate, to look into themselves. I have met many of them who have given up drink, who have given up drugs, given up sex, who have given up everything for a new transformed life. And they are doing this, why? Because obviously they are getting something within. They have stopped going to their churches, their temples, etc., etc. A lot of churches in England now have been taken over by the Hindus to run as temples. In some other places, apparently they're using them only as marriage halls. But more and more people are taking to this path of spirituality. And this very deeply religious UN Secretary General, U Thant, who was the one who brought Sri Chinmoy into the United Nations, had said that ultimately world peace will come when there is a great new spiritual renaissance in this world. And I believe it is coming. But whether it comes or not, and whether it comes or not depends on what each of us will do to promote it, because I think we need to promote this for our own salvation. and for safeguard humanity. We have now reached a point with all the nuclear bombs in this world, we actually need only a little malfunction somewhere, an electrical short circuit or something, for one missile to go off. No one would know who started it. As Bertrand Russell said, in the next war, the question will be not who is right, but who is left. We'll all be destroyed. So therefore, unless we can find some solution to our problems, an enlightened solution to this is where I believe Gandhi has made a very major contribution, not just to India, but to the whole world. That is why I feel so fulfilled in what I'm doing now. I was much more comfortable when I was an ambassador, I can assure you. But I feel much more fulfilled in what I'm doing now. And as I go from country to country and as I meet people, I feel it's a very worthwhile effort. I'd like to end up by saying that this book, all the recent books published by a European publisher, all look alike. But this one is more attractive than all the other because they've made a very subtle sort of color change, and this stands out so beautifully. So I love this most of all. And and this dear lady, we've been working together. The first time I'm meeting her, she has been a name for a long, long time. Yeah, and very many thanks to you. And I'd end up by saying, I love you all. Thank you so much.